Have you ever looked at a globe? Not just glanced at it, but really looked. You see the blue oceans, the green and brown continents, the white ice caps. It looks like a nice rock, a pretty marble floating in space, a backdrop for our lives. But what if it's more than that? What if the whole thing, the rock, the water, the air, and every living creature on it, is all part of one single giant system? A system that acts a lot like a living organism. Like, that's the core idea behind the Gaia hypothesis. It suggests that Earth isn't just a planet with life on it. It suggests that Earth is, in a way, alive. This sounds strange at first, maybe a little mystical, but the idea didn't come from a poet or a philosopher. It came from a hard-nosed scientist named James Lovelock, and it started with a question about another planet. In the 1960s, NASA was getting ready to send probes to Mars. They wanted to know if there was life there. So they hired Lovelock, an independent inventor and chemist, to help them design experiments. How would you detect life on a distant planet? Most scientists were thinking about landing a probe, scooping up some soil, and looking for microbes. Lovelock had a different idea. He thought you didn't need to go there at all. He said you could tell if a planet had life just by looking at its atmosphere from a distance. His logic was simple. Think about a dead planet. A planet without life is just a big ball of chemicals and rock. Over billions of years, its atmosphere would settle into a predictable state. It would reach chemical equilibrium. That's a fancy way of saying everything has reacted with everything else that it can, and now it's stable and boring. Mars and Venus, our neighbors, have atmospheres like this. They are overwhelmingly carbon dioxide with very little oxygen or other reactive gases. They are predictable, they are in balance, they are dead. Now look at Earth's atmosphere. It's a mess. It's an impossible wild mix of gases that shouldn't exist together. It's about 21% oxygen. Oxygen is an incredibly reactive gas. It loves to combine with other things. It causes rust, it fuels fire. Left to its own devices, it should have combined with rocks and gases in the atmosphere and disappeared long ago. Yet, here it is, at a steady 21%. Our atmosphere also has methane in it. Methane and oxygen shouldn't coexist. They react with each other. It's like having wolves and rabbits in the same small cage and expecting them to just ignore each other. The fact that both gases are present in our atmosphere means something is constantly producing them. Lovelock looked at this chemical chaos and saw a sign. This wasn't the signature of a dead planet in equilibrium. This was the signature of a planet being actively managed. Something was keeping this unstable mixture just right. And that something, he concluded, was life. Life wasn't just a passenger on Earth. Life was in the driver's seat. It was actively creating and maintaining the conditions it needed to survive. This was the birth of the Gaia hypothesis, named after the Greek goddess of the Earth. Lovelock, with the help of a brilliant microbiologist named Lynn Margulis, proposed that the Earth's biosphere, atmosphere, oceans, and soil are a tightly coupled system. A self-regulating system. Together, they behave like a single organism, working to keep the planet's surface conditions stable and habitable for life. It's important to be clear about what this does not mean. Lovelock was not saying the Earth is a conscious being. He wasn't saying it's a giant sentient creature that thinks or feels. It's not about a Mother Earth who loves us and takes care of us. The mechanism is much more ordinary and much more profound. It's about feedback loops. A feedback loop is a simple concept you already know. Your home has a thermostat. You set it to a comfortable temperature. If the house gets too cold, the thermostat senses it and turns the heater on. The house warms up. Once it reaches the target temperature, the thermostat senses it and turns the heater off. That's a negative feedback loop. It works to keep conditions stable. The Gaia hypothesis argues that the Earth is full of these feedback loops on a global scale. Life itself creates and manages them. It's not done intentionally. It's an emergent property. It's what happens when millions of species are all living, breathing, eating, and dying, each pursuing its own self-interest. The combined effect of all that activity creates a stable global environment. To explain this, Lovelock and a colleague, Andrew Watson, came up with a simple computer model called Daisyworld. It's a brilliant way to understand the core idea. Imagine a planet just like Earth, orbiting a sun just like ours. But on this planet, only two kinds of life can grow: black daisies and white daisies. Black daisies absorb sunlight and warm the area around them. White daisies reflect sunlight and cool the area around them. Both types of daisies have an optimal temperature range where they grow best. If it's too cold, they can't grow. If it's too hot, they can't grow. Now, let's start the simulation. In the beginning, the sun is young and cool. The planet is cold, almost too cold for daisies to grow, but in a few spots around the equator, it's just warm enough for a few black daisies to sprout. Because they are black, they absorb sunlight and warm the ground around them. This makes it easier for more black daisies to grow. They start to spread. As the black daisies cover more of the planet, they absorb more of the sun's energy, and the whole planet starts to warm up. The sun in the model, just like our real sun, is slowly getting hotter over billions of years. As the planet warms, it approaches the ideal temperature for all daisies. Now the white daisies can start to grow too. At first, the black daisies still have an advantage because they keep their local environment cozy. But as the sun continues to get hotter, the planet's temperature keeps rising. It starts to get a little too warm for the black daisies. Their growth slows down, but for the white daisies, conditions are great. They start to thrive. And because they are white, they reflect sunlight back into space. This has a cooling effect on the planet. Now, the feedback loop kicks in. As the planet gets hotter, the white daisies do better. As the white daisies do better, they cool the planet down. If the planet gets too cool, the black daisies get an advantage and warm it back up. The two populations of daisies, each just trying to survive and grow, end up regulating the entire planet's temperature. For a very long time, as the sun gets progressively hotter, the daisies automatically adjust their populations to keep the planet's temperature stable and comfortable for life. That's Gaia in a nutshell. No daisy is thinking about saving the planet. No daisy is making a conscious sacrifice for the greater good. The black daisies are just trying to stay warm. The white daisies are just trying to stay cool. But the collective result of their individual actions is a planet that regulates its own temperature. Of course, the real Earth is infinitely more complex than Daisyworld. We don't have just two species, we have millions. And they don't just affect temperature, they affect the composition of the atmosphere, the salinity of the oceans, the chemistry of the soil. But the principle is the same. Let's look at some real-world examples that seem to support this idea. Consider the saltiness of the oceans. Rivers are constantly washing minerals and salts from the land into the sea. Evaporation then removes fresh water from the ocean, leaving the salt behind. By this logic, the oceans should have become much, much saltier over geological time. They should be as salty as the Dead Sea by now, a brine so harsh that most life couldn't survive. But they're not. The ocean salinity has remained remarkably stable, at around 3.5% for hundreds of millions of years. Why? The Gaian explanation is that life helps regulate it. One way this happens is through the creation of vast salt flats. Huge, shallow lagoons can get cut off from the sea. In hot climates, the water evaporates, leaving behind massive deposits of salt, effectively taking it out of the system. The formation of these lagoons is often aided by life, like the growth of coral reefs or microbial mats that create barriers. So, life helps to bury the excess salt, keeping the oceans habitable. Then there's the atmosphere, Lovelock's starting point. The oxygen level has stayed surprisingly stable for millions of years. It's high enough for large, active animals like us to exist. But it's not too high. If the oxygen level rose to about 25%, the planet would become a tinderbox. Even damp forests would catch fire from a single lightning strike and burn to the ground. Life seems to maintain a delicate balance, producing enough oxygen for respiration, but not so much that the world incinerates itself. This regulation is likely achieved through a complex dance of photosynthesis, which produces oxygen and decomposition, which consumes it, involving countless species of plants, algae, and microbes. Perhaps the most compelling piece of evidence is something called the faint young sun paradox. Astronomical models tell us that when life first appeared on Earth, about 4 billion years ago, the sun was about 30% dimmer and weaker than it is today. With so much less heat coming from the sun, the early Earth should have been a frozen ball of ice. All of its water should have been solid. But the geological record shows that this wasn't the case. There was liquid water, there was life, so what kept the planet warm? A Gaian perspective suggests that early life changed the atmosphere. Early microbes may have pumped out huge amounts of greenhouse gases like methane and carbon dioxide. These gases would have trapped the sun's faint heat, like a planetary blanket, keeping the Earth warm enough for life to thrive. As the sun grew stronger over billions of years, new forms of life, like photosynthetic plankton, evolved. These organisms started pulling massive amounts of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. This thinned the greenhouse blanket, cooling the planet and counteracting the increasing heat from the sun. Just like in Daisyworld, as the external conditions changed a hotter sun, life itself changed the environment to keep the planet's temperature stable. It's a remarkable claim that life didn't just adapt to a changing planet, it actively shaped the planet to keep it habitable. When Lovelock and Margulis first proposed the Gaia hypothesis in the 1970s, the scientific community was not impressed. Many were openly hostile. It sounded too much like mysticism, not science. Biologists in particular had a big problem with it. The dominant view in biology at the time was, and still is, centered on Darwinian evolution and the concept of the selfish gene popularized by Richard Dawkins. Natural selection works at the level of the individual organism. An individual with a trait that helps it survive and reproduce will pass that trait on. Organisms compete with each other. The idea that microbes or plants would do something that benefits the entire planet, possibly at a cost to themselves, seemed impossible. How could a bacterium evolve to regulate the atmosphere for the good of all? Natural selection just doesn't work that way. It has no foresight. It can't plan for the future good of the planet. Dawkins famously called it a teleological idea, meaning it implied a goal or purpose. He argued that Earth couldn't be a single organism because it doesn't reproduce. It can't be subject to natural selection. There aren't a bunch of competing Earths where the one that is best at self-regulation wins. These were powerful criticisms. Lovelock eventually refined his position. He agreed that organisms don't altruistically work for the good of the planet. He clarified that Gaia works through selfishness, not cooperation. The Daisyworld model shows this perfectly. The white daisies don't spread to cool the planet. They spread because the local conditions created by a hotter sun favor them over the black daisies. They are just acting in their own self-interest. The planetary regulation is a side effect, an emergent property of all the organisms simply trying to make their own local patch of the world a little more comfortable for themselves. An organism that pollutes its own nest will die. An organism that creates conditions that favor its own survival will thrive. Now, scale that up to a global level. The sum of all life, each species acting in its own interest, changes the environment. If those changes happen to make the planet more stable and more suitable for life as a whole, then that system persists. It's a kind of natural selection, not on organisms, but on systems. The systems that are stable, the ones where life and the environment work together, are the ones that last for billions of years. Over the decades, the scientific view of Gaia has softened. While many scientists still dislike the name and its New Age connotations, the core idea has become mainstream. It has been absorbed into a new field of study called Earth System Science. This field looks at the Earth as a single, integrated system of physical, chemical, and biological processes. It's Gaia by another name. Climate scientists, oceanographers, and ecologists now routinely study the massive feedback loops between life and the environment. They acknowledge that you cannot understand the climate without understanding the role of plankton in the ocean. You cannot understand the atmosphere without understanding the role of the Amazon rainforest. So, where does that leave us today? The Gaia hypothesis gives us a powerful new way to think about our own species and our impact on the planet. For most of Earth's history, the Gaian system has handled disruptions. A giant volcano erupts, spewing ash and gas into the atmosphere. The system stumbles, the climate changes for a while, some species go extinct, but eventually, life adjusts the feedback loops and a new stability is found. An asteroid hits. The system is massively wounded. A mass extinction occurs, but life is resilient. Over millions of years, new species evolve, new feedback loops are established, and the system recovers. But the disruption we are causing is different. Humans have become a force of nature on a geological scale. We are now the single biggest driver of change in the Gaian system. Our industrial civilization is pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere at a rate far faster than most volcanoes. We are cutting down the great forests that help regulate the air and water. We are acidifying the oceans, threatening the plankton that form the base of the marine food web, and play a huge role in the global carbon cycle. We are pushing Gaia hard. We are disrupting the ancient feedback loops that have kept the Earth stable for eons. And here is the most important, and perhaps most terrifying, lesson from the Gaia hypothesis. Gaia is not our mother. The system does not care about humans. It has no particular attachment to us, or to polar bears, or to coral reefs. It is not trying to preserve the world as we know it. The system is only interested in stability. It will simply adjust to the new reality we are creating. If we push the system too far, we might cross a tipping point. The feedback loops that have kept the climate stable for us could flip. For example, as the Arctic warms, the permafrost melts. That melting permafrost releases huge amounts of methane, a potent greenhouse gas. That methane causes more warming, which melts more permafrost, which releases more methane. That's a positive feedback loop. It's a runaway train. The Gaian system will eventually find a new stable state. It might be a much hotter, stormier planet. It might be a planet with very different oceans and a different atmosphere. It might be a planet with far less biodiversity. The system will continue. Life, in some form, will almost certainly survive and adapt. And Gaia will rebalance itself, but that new, stable state might not include us. It might not be a world that can support a global civilization of billions of people. In this view, climate change isn't a disease that the Earth has contracted, it's more like a fever. The Earth system is responding to a disturbance, an infection, and that infection is us. The fever is the system's way of fighting back and trying to reach a new stable state. We just happen to be living inside the patient. So is the Earth a living organism? The answer is it depends on your definition of living. If a living thing must reproduce, then no, Earth isn't alive. If a living thing must be conscious, then no. But if a living thing is defined as a complex system, bounded from its environment, that actively maintains its own internal conditions through self-regulation, then the Earth looks a lot like a living organism. It maintains a stable temperature. It regulates its atmospheric chemistry. It cycles nutrients. It behaves as a single integrated whole. The rock, the air, the water, and the life are not separate things. They are all parts of one vast interconnected entity. Perhaps the question itself isn't the most important thing. The true value of the Gaia hypothesis is not in providing a simple yes or no answer. Its value is in the way it changes our perspective. It forces us to stop seeing the Earth as a static backdrop, a warehouse of resources for us to exploit. It forces us to see it as a dynamic, responsive system of which we are a part. A very powerful and very disruptive part. It gives us a framework for understanding that polluting a river in one continent can affect the weather on another. That cutting down a forest can change the composition of the entire global atmosphere. Nothing happens in isolation. Everything is connected. Thinking of the Earth as a living system, even if only as a metaphor, carries a profound sense of responsibility. You don't deliberately break your own thermostat. You don't poison your own life. If we see ourselves as part of a larger living system, not as masters of a dead rock, our actions take on a new weight. We are not just harming the environment. We are harming the very system that created us and keeps us alive. We are cells in a larger body, and we have started to make the body sick. The story of Gaia is a story about connection. It reminds us that the air we breathe was made by plankton and plants. The stability of our climate is tied to the health of our forests and oceans. We are utterly dependent on the health of this vast planetary life support system. For a long time, we were unaware of our own power. Now we know. We are at the controls whether we want to be or not. The future of the human experiment depends on whether we can learn to act less like a planetary disease and more like a responsible part of a living Earth.